Hi, my name is Ken Lasseson. I wrote the Microbiome prescription website, and today I'm going to do a review of Microbiome, which is of particularly personal interest. I am a high-functioning ASD person. In fact, I did not start to learn to speak in terms of learning to speak English words and phrases, apart from a few words and phrases which were very badly mispronounced until the age of 9. If you listen to me speak now, you should be aware that I was born and grew up in Vancouver, BC and Seattle, so I should have a clean West Coast English pronunciation, and you hear it's not. Mother was born in 1913, grew up in Canada on the West Coast, so there is no speech issue from parents. It is strictly as a result of autism or a form of autism as a child. So, given that personal note, let us go into this particular child. Child was born, diagnosed, lots of reflux, always threw up digested milk, etc., etc., etc. There's a long list of there. And he started saying words at 3.5 after the removing of gluten and dairy from his diet. And we actually find from the microbiome those things, gluten and dairy, are to be avoided in terms of his microbiome. But we also find some other interesting things in his microbiome. So goes through and gives a history, and the actual history from the mother is much longer than that. I just took some of the highlights out. She actually did 2 samples about 18 months apart, and this is the first sample which an actual analysis is being done on. Now, out of curiosity, I ran both of them through, and one of the reasons I wanted to run both of them through, although there's 18 months apart, is that this person is a adolescent, a child. And what we do know is that a child's microbiome is different than an adult's microbiome. But almost all the data I'm working from is for adults, not for children. So I was curious to see if there's any apparent shifts between the 2 samples over 18 months. And there appear to be very significant shifts. On the left, we have the earlier sample, and then we have the latest. Both samples shows the same characteristic. Here we have percentile. Here is the number of bacteria, be it at a genus or species level, that we would expect to occur in between 0 and 9% of all samples. In other words, these are very rare bacteria. Then from 10 to 19% of the samples, or 10 to 19 percentile, depending on how you want to phrase it, all the way up. And then we hit those which usually appear in 90 to 99% of percentile. If this microbiome sample was typically normal, then what one would expect, since these are each 10% of things, you would expect all of these numbers to be almost identical. And you in fact find a measure called standard deviation would theoretically be 0 or pretty close to 0. That's not what we see. What we see is something unusual so far, but then again, I've only added this table recently, is that there's overrepresentation of the most common one. In other words, the most common bacteria, he doesn't just have an 80% chance, he just has a 5% chance of having all of them. And that these bacteria which he has would generally be considered to be good bacteria, but he has an overabundance of them. And overabundance usually means too much production of enzymes, of compound, which are probably contributing to his symptoms. So that is something you can see in the earlier sample, and it's still very visible in the sample. In the top 10%, you see 40. And down here, you barely get 8 or 9 or 10, and then double to 20, and then double to 40. Massive number of increase of bacteria, which are ones which are the most commonly seen. Which another way of expressing it could be underrepresentation of the rarer bacteria would be another way of expressing it. But it's a shift to the most common one, or a shift away from seeing the minor players. Both of them would represent with the same number, but the number of bacteria we have is a good, healthy number. So he's not short of bacteria. It's just that there is a distinctive shift in which bacteria he has a lot of and which one he doesn't, in terms of species and genus, in terms of how many different ones, not necessarily the amount. So what we are going to do is we're going to go in, and what I did was, and you'll see in a few moments on the video, I went in and looked at a variety of potential medical conditions, and we got a long list of candidates. Look at bacteria deemed unhealthy, another long list of candidates. And then we went over and looked at Jason Harlex, which are a collection of goals which he has derived for adults. Whether it don't apply to kids or not is very questionable. But what we find is that the first sample, he was 75 percentile, not ideal, acceptable. But the latest one went all the way up to 98.8%. In other words, better than most people. It, in some ways, one could conclude that his criteria and recommendations may not work for adolescents with autism, because they come through often with quite good, healthy numbers. And when I went on and looked at AI computed probiotics, the first sample had a bunch of things. Later sample only had was with barely any weight at all. In other words, basically it was saying, in terms of probiotic, which should be there, and I should say in terms of probiotics, is because what I'm doing is I'm calculating the production of enzymes. He is not having any shortage of enzymes, which can be supplemented by a probiotic producing them. So that is basically what the mechanism is. We look for enzymes that a person is short of, in terms of being less than 10% of other people, which are available through a probiotic. So that is the first part, and let's go over and look at the site. So I'm going to go over what I just discussed in terms of the blog post by actually looking at the site. You can see the numbers. So we have two samples here, and they're nicely dated. So you can see this is the latest one, this is the earlier one. And there we see what the numbers are there. You see a standard deviation there. Basically, I just copied and pasted, just highlighted numbers, copy and paste it in Excel, and got a standard deviation there. So that's one, and then here is the other one, and you can see the numbers went down 64, so it has gone down by gain. We notice this high predominance of common bacteria and the sparsity of even typical bacteria. So we have that information there, and the next thing I did was went over to health analysis. So the health analysis for his latest sample, you can see the long list of issues he potentially has. Now, these are again the bacteria which are associated with particular conditions in adults. Psoriasis may be an issue which he started having, I don't know. PTSD is not that unusual to see as a possible candidate for apnea, sleep problems. Alzheimer's, what you are likely measuring is bacteria shifts connected with cognitive and memory issues, and he does have cognitive memory issues. ADHD, not really needed. He is a good match for ADHD. Long COVID, diabetes too, etc. So the size of the list indicates substantial microbiome dysfunction. These are not predictors. They simply indicate the degree of match to profiles which are seeing for a specific condition. And the fact that he has so many sitting there high indicates severe microbiome dysfunction. Then we get down into the unhealthy bacteria, the ones there, including some which are associated with dysentery, pathogen, etc. So we have, and then at the bottom we have Jason Harlex. So this is for his latest sample. Now, if we and look at his earlier sample, we see never long. It's not quite as long, but close there. And then everything else down here. And again, as a reminder, citations here will take you to where this information is coming from. In other words, I have not arbitrarily picked this thing or this or based it on internet rumors or internet mythologies. I've done it always from a recognized public study, usually on the U.S. National Library of Medicine, better known as PubMed there. So that's basically comes back to cover most of it. Let's go over and look at AI suggested his sample. And we see we have all the values are relatively small. When I deal with chronic infection, the values are 800, 900. All these are minor. So M is pretty good for producing the minimum amount of the enzyme. The problem is he may be overproducing enzyme, which is a totally different challenge. And then looking at the latest one, and we have just one, and it's barely on the map. And as we see shortly, this is a kid who I would suggest probably no probiotics for at all. Actually, there's one, but I don't think it is readily available at the retail level. And we can go back in and look at the last thing for my profile, which is just the supplements. And it's empty because there's nothing there at the 10% level. We could try going up to 20% and see if there's anything there. Still not. That means he is producing all the things which are available as supplements in a good amount. And so we can also go and change the earlier one, mainly as an experiment. Still blank. So in other words, he is producing, he has no deficiency of enzymes or supplements which we can address. Instead, he may have excessive enzymes and excessive compounds being produced, which presents a very different type of challenge. Okay, so with that said, let's go back and look at the blog. I titled this section as Going Forward because we have just finished describing where he's at, and now we want to try improving it to get suggestions that should at least moderate or correct some of the microbiome dysfunction. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the standard set of options, and each option uses a different criteria for how we pick bacteria which we want to change. Nobody knows exactly how to pick the perfect set of bacteria. Often everything gets very complicated because bacteria interact with each other, and in fact 3 out of 4 of a particular combination of bacteria, you may not have a symptom. You have different 3 of those 4 bacteria, you may have the symptom. You have all 4, you definitely have the symptom. So there's a whole bunch of complicated mathematics involved in terms of understanding it. So to make life simple, what we do is we go and we use different criteria for picking the bacteria. And then we go and look at all the suggestions, and from all the suggestions, our goal is to find things which is consistent across all sets of suggestions. In other words, no matter how we pick the criteria and the different combinations of bacteria, we get the same bottom line message happening. And thereby using that, we are hopefully able to have a fair degree of confidence that the suggestions, regardless of how you want to pick the bacteria, are probably good suggestions. So we go to look at it, and some of the suggestions comes out is neem, clove, thyme, adway, ashwagandha, olive leaf as either herbs to add to cooking, herbs to put into capsules, or herbs for use in tea. And then we look at probiotic. Only one came up in the list, and it's a bit of an odd one because, as the implication is, it's a bacteria which typically is a mouth bacteria, not a gut bacteria. That's the only one that showed up, and I have some hesitancy, as we'll see shortly. And then lifestyle, we have vegetarian, tea, rice, saccharin, and stevia, which are alternative sugar sweetener, maybe things. But here is one of the dilemmas. The dilemma, in terms of common sense, is he's underweight. So you probably want to give him sugar to try put on weight. And stevia and saccharin doesn't necessarily put on weight. So you could be torn in there. I would go with fixing the gut and then worrying about the weight after the gut is better. Chances are the weight issue will resolve itself by fixing the gut rather than trying to add sugar and fatten the kid up intentionally. What you want to do is fix the gut first. And then we have some vitamins. We have a good number of the B vitamins showing up there. And then we have a bunch of things to reduce. These are, again, things which improve or worsen the odds. They do not guarantee, you don't have to do them. They just impact odds. So some cases a little bit, in some cases a great amount. We don't know because the studies don't really give us that information, unfortunately. So magnesium, basically foods rich in, for example, walnuts, selenium, zinc, CLA, quercetin, resveratrol, noni, etc. Just list there and we go through more in terms of detail. One is that one of the things to avoid, which was spelled out by suggestion, is lactose, which is in milk, and hence there's no tolerance for milk. Another thing which came out was to avoid almost every food that contains gluten, and going gluten-free to improve things. So basically his microbiome is still saying no gluten, etc. because of the and then we have a variety of antibiotics on the suggested list, one of which is interesting because it is usually used to treat colitis, inflammation of the intestine caused by bacteria that occur after antibiotic treatment. Kid has had antibiotics. Perhaps what he needs is this particular antibiotic to counter the other antibiotic. And this one was the number one suggestion for antibiotics. So after I shipped over the draft, a bunch of questions came back. And basically, in terms of mother was interested in finding which probiotics, because of course, common internet mythology is probiotics will fix everything. The problem is, for this kid, it's more likely to make things worse than better. So, none of the DNA-based probiotic suggestions showed up except for one, which is Prescript Assist, which is, for me, it's a bit of a problematic one. It's in the database, hence it comes up. It's problematic because there are issues with the manufacturer, changes of recipes, etc. So whether or not it's going to work or not work is a little bit less certain. A lot of just dealt with the issues of probiotics, and I want to sort of quickly hop over down and take care and look at, first of all, Lactobacillus, and we'll come back and look at Bifidobacterium too. Lactobacillus, we have this count here, and over here, 98th percentile. 98 out of every 100 people have less Lactobacillus than he does. He has a surplus of it. Now the question the mother asked is, okay, which species of those should we get rid of? Okay, I looked and see, okay, we find a grand total is 65,000. And we have exactly 3 species identified. One has 800, 167 there. That's 1,200 out of 65,000. That's about just a bare 2% of the species identified. Which species is causing it? We don't know. It's maybe because of the 16SS doesn't test for the other species, or the other species may be effectively unknown. We were able to detect that it's in the genus of Lactobacillus, but we're not able to actually identify which species it is. So the result is you want to reduce Lactobacillus, forget doing any Lactobacillus probiotics. You are just going to make things worse for the kids. You're not going to really help them. And we're about to flip back, but she also and I basically bent my usual rules and asked for more definitive lists to guide her. And basically, my first suggestion is, and she needs to talk to her MD about it, is 2 courses of antibiotics. The first is the vancomycin, which is the one which counteracts the effects of antibiotics. Very obvious as to why. And another one that came high on the list is either one of those two as a follow-up with a 3-week, the first course finished and the second course finished. Both of those should help get the gut bacteria away. I would suggest 3 weeks after to do another microbiome sample. So that would be 8 weeks after starting. Supplements. One thing which I saw high on the list, which from personal experience, and therefore I'm biased here, so this is not totally objective, but it is high on the list, is a baby aspirin once a day. And particularly look out for any improvement in brain activity. And the reason is he may have a subclinical, i.e. mild, or not, we don't really need to treat it, of APS syndrome, thick blood, which is triggered by the microbiome shift. I'm reflecting this because I had the same issue, and I think it was actually a factor in some of my autistic behavior. Once it was treated, I found I was thinking clearer, better, and now that I understood what my APS triggers are, my cognitive ability, and I'm 70 now, and is much better than it was when I was younger. So it is something which I'm speculating on, but baby aspirin is high on the list of suggestions. We have the B vitamins, soothing energy. Make sure you review with your MD. Their diet suggestion is low carbohydrate diet with ivar, and because the mother is Indian, I looked for in a top suggestion for diet styles, and this basically end up with an either or, basically vegetarian, which may come very naturally, or a high beef diet. High beef diet, given that if the child has been largely eating like a vegetarian, is the most likely to cause a change. However, there may be religious and cultural principles involved there. So there, we covered a bunch up above, and we'll see again shortly. Probiotics, there's only one that really showed up, but I know this one is a very hard one to find anywhere in the world, literally in the world. If you can find it, good. Otherwise, no. The other bacillus probiotics do not show up as anywhere significant. Key thing is, as you will see in a moment, he is very high in both lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. Most autistic kids are high in bifidobacterium, and those two are what is in probiotics. In other words, you are going to be tossing fuel, you'd be burning gas, pouring gasoline on a forest fire. That's not what you really want to do. You want to calm down the forest fire. You don't want to be pumping gasoline on the forest fire. You want to be pumping water on it. Done because it's a kid, probably wants to have juice, etc. So I listed out the type of fruit which are indicate a positive aspect. Melatonin supplement, that should be discussed with your MD for how much and dosage. And then items to avoid are a very interesting one. Things like sesame cake or meal, which may or may not be part of diet at the moment. Almonds, skin, and walnuts to be avoided. Walnuts are high in magnesium, which is something which you want to reduce. Here we have all sorts of things which can generally fall under the general description of gluten. Some of them may not actually have much gluten left, but all of them individually came out as to be avoided. Pea fiber and beans are to be avoided, which for some Indian cuisine may mean some adjustment in terms of what the person does. Fish oil, apple juice, pomegranate, kiwi, goji berry juice, dates, corn, plantain, bananas, cacao are all be good to discourage them. You don't have to stop them, but you want to try to reduce the amount because they all contributed to the microbiome dysfunction. Some cases very little, but every little bit counts. So at that point, let's go back over and take a look at the sample. Okay, what we do have over here, core analysis, and we have autism as one of them. Autism, and here we 8 bacteria selected, and we end up actually for suggestions having nothing shown. We know which bacteria it is, one of which is lactobacillus, which we already know is too high, but this most of the stuff here, there isn't anything. Okay, anything which comes out to dominate, and I may want to revisit that because I'm starting to get the feeling that there's a bug somewhere, but let's not worry about that. Let's go back here, and one set of suggestion, which is what we just did, but what we're going to do is we're going to go through here. I'm just going to do one most. The first bunch of them all comes out with the same bacteria 99% of the time, and I already pre-checked it, and that's the case here. So get suggestions, and we have suggestions over there, and double check always to make sure you got the right sample showing up and it's there. And we can go back and look at changing suggestions, and we now see we have 2, and we can go down and use a standard, which is for anybody who's done physics, basically is or statistics or chemistry. It means we calculate the average for each bacteria, standard deviation, and anything which is 2 standard deviations away from the mean, we flag, and we pick it that way. There's a click here on the process, so we just go on and do it, and now we get 17. There we go back, and we now go to box Whisker, which is a method in data science to identify outliers when things aren't a bell curve. So we click here, and we get 59. A lot more bacteria are flagged. And we go back here, and we use the cutoff markup, which is determines the cutoff points by how the shape of the microbiome distribution is. So both of those are biased towards a particular shape of statistical distribution. This is less biased towards those distribution. It's an oddball, but it seems to work well for finances and also for the microbiome. So in this case, we get 93. We get even more suggestions. And last, we're going to go through and on the bottom 10 percentile, which is here. And see if you click that open, you can see all the things which have, for example, bacillus, you're too high. We have bifidobacterium, too high, too high, too high, too high. You have a massive number of things that are too high, which means having to do something to suppress them. Antibiotics often are nice. So that's something that you may want to out to your MD if you can get him willing to look at the data. Okay, now what I'll do is before I go over to look in the consensus, I want to look at the visualization here. And what it does, it shows structure of the bacteria organized in levels, so that what we're talking about is this could be viewed as a continent, this could be viewed as the countries in a continent, so everything here is in that. This can now be viewed as the states, which are in states or provinces, which are in a country. Next level down could be viewed as the county, which are in the states, which are in a county, or the parishes. Next level down could be the towns, which are in the counties, which are in the states, which are in the countries, which are in the continent. Next one could be neighborhoods down. And if we go down the next level strains, then we're talking about which street. So that is a quick introduction to how bacteria are structured and how names are related. For example, here you have just name, which gives no clue that it belongs there. This chart is very helpful for seeing the relationship. You can, of course, just do something like typing in lactobacillus, or there we go. Here we have all of them. You can see overall 98% alpha there. And now you can see, streptococci there too, and the ones. And here again, we have the same situation. We have a very high count, but if you take a look at all of the species and strains identifying there, we get nowhere near this high count. What does that mean? It means we're dealing with unknown genuses and species, which means we have no idea of exactly what it does. All we know is that probably what you want to do is try to reduce the streptococcus. And streptococcus is a good antibiotic candidate. And again high. Lactobacillus is again high. There. Number of bacteria which are sky high. And let's go and find bifidobacterium. And there we have again 98.6 percentile. We have a bunch of them here. We have 300,000. We have just one which is 15,000, which is what? That is that's about 5% only, and the rest of them less. So we don't know all the different types of. In this one, all we know is that genus is sky high, which is not atypical for kids with autism. So again, that really dominates is the numbers and the counts are high all over the place. The question of, is this a case of overproduction of enzymes and compounds which is causing the problem? So that is the basic there. Trying to this kid better, or at least reduce the severity of the symptoms. So we go back here, and now we have 6 packages are there. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and review the consensus. But before we do that, I'm going to do one more detour. I'm going to research features. And there is a feature called handpicking using symptoms. And what we do is, if the person, in this case the person, has entered the symptoms for this person, and if you don't have symptoms entered, there'll be nothing here. And so you go and select thing, and the first symptom I'm going to pick is autism. Official diagnosis. So we have 200 cases of autism microbiome entered. All we do is click that, and now it goes and calculates for those 200 cases whatever symptoms are in common. So you see 93 has brain fog. In other words, half of the kids who have official diagnosis of autism has brain fog, half do not. We can have onset, abdomen pain, etc. So there's a whole bunch of different ones there. One of the items I'm going to... Okay, before I do that, I'm going to just simply show that. So if you do that and you click here, we'll go and which are shared across the sample. With just the one symptom, we have a short list. However, when we go back and if we add in another symptom, for example, mindedness, or do we have memory someplace? Okay, let's do absent-mindedness, which again occurs in 56 of the samples. So we know we have 200 with autism. 56, which is about 25%, has this characteristic. So we are focusing tighter on the microbiome of this combination of symptoms in autism. So we add that one, and now if we go over to here, what? And we get a ton of bacteria identified as being a common pattern against all of that one. We can go say, okay, let's make the strength relationship stronger. And if we make it stronger, okay, we drop it down. If we go to much stronger, we have one particular bacteria which is in common with all the people with autism and with memory issues there. But in general, I would tend to not go with a singleton. I would probably go with this combination. And now all you have to do is click Get Suggestions. And you can check here or check whatever out. I'm going to just be foolhardy and check all of them. And open suggestions in new window. Oops, my bad. What I did bad is when you go over and create it, it removes the old list. So I went back to expected. Now I have the short list. Now I can go and get suggestions, and again, with antibiotics and drugs. Okay, we are asking it to select only for the bacteria which are shared in autistic children who have memory issues. And there we have things to avoid, things to take. Everything here is scaled, so the highest value, positive or negative, is 1. Everything is scaled from that one. And usually I suggest going 4 and above, and there's practically nothing there and nothing there. So not a great amount there, and we have all 8 bacteria selected there, which are too high and too low. Only 1 is too high. So now let's go back to changing microbiome. And one second. Okay, I'm logged back in. I got the right sample. Always double check the samples. If you have more than one sample, we have 8 in terms of consensus. And what we can do is just view consensus suggestions. And okay, a error just happened on this page. The error I fixed and about to push up a correction for it. When I make changes, sometimes there are unexpected happens, and you get a page like this. Go up to the address bar, email me whatever is there. That will help me reproduce this email. There's certain. However, some blows up at a point which I don't get a notification from, and I depend on you to do it. And you have the page fixed within 24 hours, usually within 4 or 5 hours I'm awake. Okay, so let's go and as you can see, the page is now fixed, same identical URL as before, and I fixed the problem which was caused by the code has evolved over 3 years, and sometimes I hit old code with a different way of coding or thinking, which breaks things. Okay, so we have here, and what we have done is the old version just gave you these counts, and I would verbally wave my hand and describe all sorts of balancing. What I've done is basically I've taken that and tried to automate it into a single value to indicate probably the priority. Priority as in the ones which I would think has the greater confidence of causing desirable changes. So it's positive here, and then negative as in things that are likely to make things worse, like inulin. And one reason inulin is likely to make things worse is that it tends to feed lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, both of which are sky high. So beware of people saying, oh, this is what you need to do to fix it. If they don't know well the microbiome of autistic children, which is very different than everybody else, you're going to get horribly wrong advice and make your kid worse. So let's go back here. In terms of priority, we have the ability to filter. For example, suppose you want to see what vitamins and minerals, just click that, and now it automatically sorts it. And again, it keeps the existing order, so which is there. My personal preference is usually flushing knives, and however, kids may have problem with that. So non-flushing or low dosages. Again, talk to your MD to find appropriate dosages. Vitamin B12, B6. If there's a known methylation problem, then get the methylated B12 instead, and same with the methylated B6. We have B1, and then we have cadmium. Is it basically in the literature, but it's not typically a supplement you do. Ferric citrate, basically it's iron citrate, which is a common iron supplement. Vitamin D, vitamin C, iron, and iron, they're basically the same thing. It's just that I keep to the term which was actually used in the study to be precise, so that sometimes you have 5 different terms for almost the same thing. Like you can have inulin, you can have chicory, you can have Jerusalem artichokes, all of which basically are the same chemical underneath. Site changes, and most people say, oh, they are the same. Well, I try to keep faithful to what the actual studies are, because I don't want to start smudging the details, because then we have problems. So there, probiotics. We have one there. We have Lactobacillus kifi, which double in Italy and anywhere else. You probably have problems finding it. And then this one, the values are not the greatest. And given the background of having high bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, I would suggest not doing any, basically not doing any probiotics. Just not worth the risk. We have sugars and similarly, and what we have is we have atypical sugars being used, and including xylitol, and regular sugar bad thing. Lactose, which is in milk, is a bad thing, and the person knows it because of the bad response from getting milk. And then other things, D-ribose, another one, sugar beets sugar, so be careful of where the sugar is coming from. Sugar beets sugar is evidently significantly different, or in some study, glucose. So again, types of sugars to avoid and types of sugars to take. And many people will say, wait a minute, those aren't healthy sugars. Forget about healthy. You're trying to fix a microbiome. Bite the bullet or bite the right sugars and do it that way. So other things you can do is you can look at food additives, which doesn't give you many things. Gallic acid, food additive, bile acid. So bile salts will have something, but not particularly strong. Owning pets actually is negative. This is one of those interesting things which you usually don't view as part of a prescription, but in this case, it's detrimental. So don't get a pet, but if you do have one, then keep the pet. The emotional cost of losing a pet is just too high. Prebiotic and similar, you have masticum, you have a couple of other things, and then down the bottom you have all sorts of things to be avoided. Food excluding seasoning, you have things there. We see vegetarian is one, but not too far down the road. Actually, you see high red meat. Another place further down, you see high fat diet, etc. So you see things there. But more importantly, it says, because this is a long list, you want to see things to avoid. Barley and oats are avoid. You get a whole long list, and we have 221 items on the list. Welcome to a complicated shopping world. Herbs and spices, you see things there, things to avoid, or things not to put as seasoning if you did. A lot of these are Chinese, so you don't have to worry too much about them. And then things which are good, like neem, which I believe is available as a tea, so you may want to consider using that, etc. So that's it. Now, that's a long list, and you can't always keep hopping back up to the website to take a look at it. So that's why we have a download page. And the download is there, and you download it. Simple as that. And now you can copy it to your phone or wherever you want to. And if we do open when done, and it's only Excel over out of view at the moment. And there we have, and there it does give you links to what it changed, and it gives us the modifier. Or you could just simply go in and do a quick search while you're shopping. Should I be buying this particular food or that particular food or this vegetable or that vegetable as part of the family diet? And you can just scan on your phone, look at the phone, and take a look at it. It's a CSV file, so all you have to do is make sure you have a app suitable to read the CSV file and suitable for searching. For example, if I type the word apple, there we find apple skin is a negative, pineapple is a negative, and apple is a real bad negative. So forget, no apples. No apples in the house, perhaps. Other people, apples are high priority. Okay, so that basically takes us through basically everything. Usually my usual advice is make changes slowly, consistently, watch out for changes which are adverse, in which case don't be afraid to back up right away and go on to the next thing. Low dosage, increasing dosage, changing things adding something new every couple of days, and rotating things in and out, in and out, in and out. Because the purpose is to make your stable, dysfunctional microbiome unstable so it's able to change. So you basically, in some sense, you are going to try to nag your microbiome to become a better microbiome. And then, as I indicated earlier, my suggestion is 2 months to 3 months, and then do another sample and go from there. It's not a direct linear, here, do it once and you're there. You make some changes, it will improve it. In general, I've seen all the samples people have asked me to do a second or third review of, the microbiome has objectively improved, as in become more normal, and they have also reported symptoms have improved. Not totally better, but they have improved, and my goal is to improve symptoms, and if we're lucky to get rid of all of them, I'm happy. If not, at least the symptoms are milder and hopefully less disabling. Okay, with that said, I'll shut up and get this online.